In this video, we're going to do a complete analysis of Godzilla x Kong the New Empire frame by frame, with theories of what might also happen in the future. So if you want to know everything that happened, with a detailed analysis, come with me until the end of this video and you won't regret it. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Nerds Insights, your daily nerd news channel. The long-awaited Godzilla x Kong the New Empire has finally been released, and I can tell you that it's the best movie of the Monsterverse, but it also left many doubts for fans. For example, what is that crystal that Skar King uses to control Shimo? How did Mothra end up in the Hollow Earth? Did Godzilla lose his evolved form? How was Tiamat in the movie? We'll see all of this and much more in this complete analysis, but first, of course, leave that atomic breath of a like here in this video to strengthen the work here, and already comment for me. Did you like this movie? From 0 to 10. How many points do you give to Godzilla x Kong the New Empire? I'm anxious to see your opinion. Let's start by saying that the leaked script got about 90% of the movie right, and that was about a year ago. Another thing I wanted to say is that most of the leaked images from Godzilla x Kong the New Empire were true. However, the most famous one that isn't real is the one of Kong versus Shimo in Egypt. This confrontation unfortunately didn't happen. On the contrary, Mothra appeared in Egypt, but we'll get there soon. The movie starts with Kong fleeing from the war dogs as shown in the trailers, but then we see that in that area, Kong set up several traps to avoid fighting. However, in one of these traps, he breaks through the ground into a tunnel that kind of opens a passage to the lair of the tyrant Skar King. On this journey to find his home, he tries to feed himself and feels a huge toothache, so he enters a portal and returns to the surface of the earth. Meanwhile, Godzilla is in Rome fighting Scylla, and after easily defeating her with his atomic breath, he takes a nap in the Colosseum. Meanwhile, Jia is having many dreams and visions of the future, about what was to come. Then, Monarch picks up a distress signal from the Hollow Earth and decides to send a reconnaissance mission to understand what was happening. After Kong returns to Earth and replaces his tooth with a silver tooth, he returns to the Hollow Earth, along with a Vado transport carrying Jia, Dr. Eileen Andrews, Trapper, and Bernie, who kind of separate from Kong as he goes after the signal he's also sensing. Meanwhile, the human group ends up finding the destroyed Monarch outpost, and then they find the Ui Sanctuary, which is a sanctuary of Mothra. While Kong is on his quest, he ends up encountering Zuko, who we see at the beginning doesn't really like Kong, and other primate titans attack him. Here we can see that Kong is very fierce. Kong is very good at fighting. He defeats everyone and even teases Zuko by handing a knife to the little primate, in case he still wants to fight. Zuko explains that it's not his fault, but the fault of the tyrant Skar King, who is ordering the others to do this. So Kong offers to help, asking Zuko to take him to this location. Zuko then sets up some traps for Kong, but it doesn't work. Kong is very fierce. He defeats all the traps, all the kaijus that get in his way, and even feeds Zuko, really making him a son, adopting the mini Kong Titan there, until finally, they reach Skar King's lair. And meanwhile, on the surface, Godzilla, who also picked up the signal, wakes up from the Colosseum in Rome, goes to France and absorbs a lot of nuclear energy, reaching the point where we see him with a blue nuclear pulse. After that, he goes to Tiamat's territories, and at this point, I swear I got chills. I didn't imagine Tiamat would be in the movie. Anyone who likes to read the comics or other things involving Godzilla, besides the Monsterverse, knows the importance of this kaiju, knows everything he has done, all the trouble he has caused for Godzilla, and being able to see Tiamat is very gratifying. It was a very pleasant surprise for me. Another surprise was the ease with which Godzilla simply destroyed, literally tore apart Tiamat. The atomic breath is very overpowered. Honestly, there's no way to beat Godzilla. After defeating Tiamat, Big G enters his territory and starts absorbing all the pink energy inside. Back to Kong. He enters Skar King's lair, already asserting his authority and respect, punching people in the face, making everyone kneel, until Skar appears. As soon as Skar King meets Kong, he starts laughing at Kong's silver tooth, as if it were something to mock. Shortly after that, he ends up killing what we think is Zuko's father, throwing him into the lava. Kong becomes extremely irritated and immediately goes after Skar King, but Skar King has a huge advantage over Kong because of his mobility. We can see that Kong is bigger, fuller, has more volume and muscle mass than Skar King, who is a very skinny titan but is very skillful and agile. So he starts winning the fight against Kong, but Kong just lands one blow on Skar King, and that's enough for Skar King to have to summon Titan Shimo. And here's a part that the movie really doesn't explain, and we're left not understanding, which is, what is this crystal? How does this crystal cause pain in Shimo, making her obey Skar King? We didn't see any kind of thing, we didn't see, like, anything that could make him hurt her, just that shiny crystal, so it really didn't make much sense. Another thing that didn't make much sense were Skar King's eyes. Everyone thought he had some kind of power because his eyes were shiny. We even thought he had also consumed that star that Godzilla consumed to acquire his atomic powers, but that was also something that wasn't addressed in the movie, so as is standard for the Monsterverse, the doubt will remain for us. And to be a bit blunt, Skar King wasn't as big a threat as he seemed in the trailers and TV spots. He's much more intimidating and threatening than in the actual movie. I'm saying that the idea of a new empire, the idea of Skar King, is much scarier than Skar King himself, who just got beaten up in this movie and kept crying for help from Titanus Shimo. In other words, without Shimo, Skar King wouldn't even have a throne to call his own and would have been defeated by Godzilla millions of years ago. As I said in the analysis, without spoilers, Titanus Shimo is a titan totally devoid of charisma, totally bland, has no personality, no unique characteristic, no action, no chilling scene. She's simply bland. They didn't do justice to the powerful, strong, ancestral titan that is Titanus Shimo. She simply was another titan controlled by Skar King, which didn't make much of a difference in the movie. Honestly, it didn't, but we can see that its freezing breath is extremely powerful, capable of quickly freezing Kong's arm, damaging the tissues, skin, muscles and nerves of Kong's arm, which was practically unusable if it weren't for Trapper's prototype. The maneuver on Kong's arm, Kong wouldn't have survived long in the Hollow Earth. Kong manages to escape with Zuko's help and they go to the Mothra temple, where the Monarch human team and the Iwi people are. After putting on the gauntlet and injecting him with Trembolone, GH and other anabolic steroids, Kong returns to the surface through a portal there and calls Godzilla, which is the scene we saw that had already been leaked online. Godzilla goes to Kong already in his pink form, but he starts attacking Kong. Godzilla is very aggressive in this movie, not interested in many ideas. Even though he is a secondary character in this movie, sorry to say this but the protagonist is only Kong and all the others are supporting characters. Godzilla wasn't explored much. There weren't many things about Godzilla. He was more there as support for Kong, with brute force and aggression, and he only stopped fighting when Jia freed Mothra. And in this scene, it is shown more or less how everything happened with Skar King, with Shimo, and with Mothra. Millions of years ago, Kong's species was responsible for protecting humans, Godzilla's for protecting the planet and Mothra's for protecting the portals to the Hollow Earth. However, there was a tyrant primate named Skar King who wanted to control the surface by any means necessary. He and his army fought against the one who swallowed the star, which is the Godzilla we know. Godzilla was almost defeated but managed to imprison Skar and his entire army, including the Titan Shimo, whom Skar King controls through pain, which wasn't explained how, in a lair from which they cannot escape. In other words, Godzilla already knew Skar King and Shimo and he was the one responsible for trapping them in the Hollow Earth and not letting them out. But someday, when that tyrant titan, Skar King in this case, returns, they would need the help of the last living Iwi, coming from Skull Island, to free Mothra to be the protector of the passages in that place, and that's another thing that isn't explained. If you were hoping to find out how Mothra ended up in the Hollow Earth, you won't know, because it's not explained. I guess there's not even a theory, folks. It's not a subspecies of Mothra. It's not Mothra's child. It's not Mothra Leo. It's Mothra. It's the Mothra we saw in 2019. She was in the Hollow Earth and simply woke up when Jia approached her. There's no explanation, not even a theory. I can't think of anything to explain how Mothra ended up in that place. And Mothra, as soon as she wakes up, goes to Egypt where Kong is fighting Godzilla, who again almost kills Kong, and Mothra calms things down there, and then they return to the Hollow Earth to face Shimo and Skar King, who have left their lair and followed Kong and Zuko to Mothra's temple. There's an extremely powerful fight in zero gravity, and here I'm already talking about the final 15 minutes of the movie, okay? When the Real fight begins, it's already about 15 minutes from the end of the movie, so it becomes a unique fight, which is already the final fight and quite rushed. It's a fight that you probably already have an idea of, which is Godzilla vs Shimo, Skar King vs Kong and Zuko in the middle trying to help in some way, until gravity returns to normal and they all end up falling into the portal, but Kong's axe is left behind. If you're wondering what happened to Kong's axe, as soon as it is frozen by Titanus Shimo, Kong runs out of there and Skar King grabs the axe. So he starts using Kong's axe, but Kong recovers it in this fight. However, since the axe was left behind, Titanus Zuko grabs the axe and also enters the portal, and then he appears in Rio de Janeiro. And this was one of the silliest parts, in my opinion, because Skar King starts acting all-powerful in Rio de Janeiro and orders Shimo to start freezing the sky, freeze the water, freeze the city, and simply forgot that he was in the middle of a fight. He really thought Kong and Godzilla wouldn't follow them through the portal. Obviously, they would. And then Skar King takes a punch in the mouth from Kong and his tooth flies out through the city, and Titanus Shimo, who is obeying Skar King, also gets it because Godzilla arrives and headbutts her, throwing her into the rubble and then beating her up too. So another thing that bothered me was that this fight we see in Rio de Janeiro probably doesn't even last 5 minutes, and we practically saw the whole thing in the TV spots, trailers, and leaked scenes. we had practically watched this entire fight, except for the ending, but there are some points here that I wanted to talk about. Kong was much superior to Skar and always has been, and after he got the gauntlet, he started to simply crush Skar, who couldn't fight back and always relied on Shimo to defend him, and when Kong went to fight Shimo directly and Skar went to fight Godzilla, he got a really big beating. Godzilla broke his bone chain teeth, throwing the crystal away, giving atomic breath to Skar, who ran away in desperation, until Zuko appeared and broke the crystal that controlled Titanus Shimo. Then it became easy because Shimo was already very angry and froze Skar King entirely, and Kong just finished the job by breaking Skar, who had become an ice popsicle, and the movie ends pretty much like that. Out of the blue, Godzilla goes back to Rome and sleeps in the Colosseum, already out of his evolved form, so it's not a definitive form of Godzilla, and Kong, Zuko and Titanus Shimo go back to the Hollow Earth, where the den was, and now they begin to live peacefully with the others of Kong's species that exist there, without the tyranny of Skar and his evil army. And that's where I have some criticisms, especially about Titanus Shimo. We had so much hope for her and she simply was a letdown. She was like a plant, really seemed like a scared puppy, and this is very explicit at the end of the movie, because Kong is petting her head as if she were a dog or a pet of other kaijus. Dude, we're talking about Shimo, the biggest kaiju we've seen in the Monsterverse. She's bigger than Godzilla, bigger than King Ghidorah, the most powerful. Her ice froze Godzilla, and if it weren't for Mothra's help, Godzilla would have been frozen and shattered. If Godzilla and Kong teamed up against Shimo, it's very likely that Shimo would win, but no, she's being treated like a weak little puppy. So for us who liked her so much, had so much hope, this part was disappointing, and also the movie ended very peacefully and quickly. There are no post-credits scenes, so you don't need to stay until the very end. There are no post-credits scenes. My final thoughts are that Skar King wasn't all that we were expecting and is far from being the biggest threat in the Monsterverse as director Adam Wingard claimed. He was easily defeated by Kong, and as for Godzilla, he didn't even need human intervention this time. Ghidorah and Mechagodzilla were infinitely more difficult to deal with than Skar King. If it weren't for Shimo, he wouldn't even be alive for this movie. Titanus Shimo is completely without a story, origin, charisma, or anything else. Godzilla served more as support for Kong by holding Shimo, and Kong was the absolute protagonist in this film. Very badass and respected. I really liked the 4 central human characters, found them very enjoyable and great character choices. For me, this was an 8 out of 10 movie. I love the experience of watching my first Monsterverse film in 3D at the cinema. Have you watched this movie? If you haven't rated it yet, on a scale from 0 to 10, I'd give it an 8. I really enjoyed this movie, found it very fun, rewarding, and would watch it again. If you haven't, let me know when you're planning to watch it and then come back to this video to give your rating, okay? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as it's very important for us to continue doing this work. With the bell activated, you also help me make sure the news reaches you. We're together once again, and see you later, alligator.